Hi, this is Sue Jackson of the Book by Book blog. Welcome to my October reading wrap-up. Here are some of the books in print that I finished this last month, and I also finished 3 books on audio, so it was a great reading month for me. I want to tell you all about it. I've been feeling like I get rambling too much in these videos, and they end up too long. I don't know about you, but I know when I'm choosing videos to watch, I don't have a whole lot of time, so I usually go for the shorter ones. So I am going to try to turn over a new leaf and just give a brief overview of each of the books that I enjoyed last month. I tend to get really excited about the good books that I've read and want to tell you more, but I'm going to try to keep it short today. So please let me know in the comments down below whether you prefer more detail on the books or shorter videos. I'm interested to know what you think. So I've got my handy falling apart reading journal here, and lots of great books read in October. Just as a reminder, for September and October, I did both the R.I.P. challenge, Readers Imbibing Peril, and also the Fall Into Reading challenge here on BookTube. So the R.I.P. challenge involves just reading darker stuff during the fall, getting into the mood of the season. Mystery, suspense, thrillers, ghost stories, witches, dark fantasy, anything that that fits with the season. So I mentioned at the beginning of September in my intro video that a lot of the books I had chosen, without my realizing it, I chose all mysteries and suspense and things like that, thrillers. Without realizing it, a lot of them had to do with the outdoors. I really love nature and the outdoors, love spending time in the outdoors. So the first book up in October was The Guide by Peter Heller, a book I had really been looking forward to reading. This is not technically a sequel, but kind of a follow-up to his book, The River. So one of the main characters from The River is the main character again here in the guide. His name is Jack. Jack is back home in Colorado, where he grew up. The river takes place in Canada. Jack's been through a lot, which you'd know if you read The River. So he's kind of come home. He spends some time with his dad at his dad's house. He's trying to kind of heal and move on with his life. So he accepts a summer job with this very exclusive fishing resort on a beautiful river. It's like one of the most beautiful places in Colorado, which is saying a lot. And it's a small resort that caters to very wealthy clients, even celebrities who want to remain anonymous. So Jack settles in. Right from the first day, things seem a little off to him. Some of the rules that the manager tells him are a little odd. Like if you go too far upstream, there's a sign on the shore that says don't go any further or you'll get shot. Things like this just seem a little off to Jack. There's barbed wire across the whole river on the downstream side, and that's one of the things I loved about this book. It includes a map. I'm sure I'm not the only one who likes maps in my books. So Jack takes this job. He starts working at this resort. His first visitor that it gets assigned to guide is named Allison. Now, Jack's not really into pop culture, but even he recognizes her. And after getting to know her a little bit, he realizes she's a really famous singer. But she is also an avid fly fisher. So the two of them spend their days out on the river fishing. They eat their meals at the lodge that's part of this resort. But the weird things keep piling up. And some of them aren't weird, but really dark and threatening. So the longer Jack spends at this resort, the more he realizes there is something really awful going on there, and something that the owners are trying to cover up. So it's a mystery, it's a thriller. The beginning is a little slower as these small moments kind of add up in Jack's mind. The end is, like the last quarter to a third is fast-paced action, thriller-like. There's the mystery of what's going on at this place, but through it all, Heller's nature writing is just stunningly beautiful. And I really loved that about this book and his previous book, The River. And also his book, Celine, which also takes place very much in the outdoors. So I highly recommend both The River and The Guide by Peter Heller. My first audiobook that I listened to in October was Creep by Ligia de Peñaflor. I really enjoyed her novel, her YA novel that I listened to on audio last year. I'll put the picture up here. And so I knew as soon as I saw Creep was being released, I knew I wanted to listen to that too. This was just as good, very different though. It's about obsession. So the narrator is a teen girl. She's a sophomore in high school named R.I.P. And the narration on the audio is perfect. The narrator just does this perfect, sweet adolescent girl. She seems really nice, but she's got some really dark things going on inside. She gets obsessed with the senior class's sort of it couple, the most popular girl and the most popular boy who've been dating forever. They're both very talented, him in athletics and her in dance. They're very popular, they're both beautiful, and Rafi just becomes obsessed with them and obsessed with being a part of their lives. And she convinces herself that all of this is normal and natural. So she starts finding little ways to kind of insert herself into their lives. She joins the same clubs that the girl is in. She offers to babysit the boy's younger sister. And in these ways, she just little by little inserts herself into their lives. And then when something tragic happens to the couple, she is determined to make sure that they stay together and that things turn out okay for them, no matter what. So there's a creeping sense of dread through all of this. It's perfectly titled because as I was listening, I kept thinking, ooh, this is so creepy. So highly recommend Creep by Ligia de Peñaflor. My last book in print is The Last Policeman by Ben Winters. Now this book won an Edgar Award for Best Original Paperback, and I can definitely see why. So this is book one in a trilogy, and I bought this for my husband as a gift a couple of years ago, and he liked it so much, I got him the second book last year, and we'll probably get him the third book this year. It's a great trilogy. This is classic detective story, police procedural, but with a big twist. The world is ending in 6 months. There's an asteroid headed to the Earth. Huge, giant asteroid will definitely hit. There is nothing they can do to stop it. And people are dealing with this in different ways. A lot of people are just walking away from their jobs, deciding to spend their last 6 months doing the things they've always wanted to do. And so the whole setting here is really fascinating. Like all the chain restaurants are no longer franchised because all the wealthy owners have left to, fulfill their bucket list before the end of the world. So there's a McDonald's in the first scene of this that's a pirated McDonald's. There's a guy that used to work there that's still running it, even though there's no corporate McDonald's anymore. So anyway, Detective Hank Palace is not walking out of the job. He has just recently become a detective, in part because of this crisis, because some of the other detectives did walk off the job. This is what he's wanted to do his whole life. And so he is committed to the job, even though the world's ending. So in that opening scene at the McDonald's, he's called out early one morning. There's a dead man in the men's restroom at the McDonald's. It appears to be yet another suicide. A lot of people are reacting that way to the coming apocalypse by killing themselves. In his town in particular, a lot of people have hung themselves. And this guy has a belt around his neck. Seems to be clear that he's hung himself. But there's a couple of things at the crime scene that Hank just feels aren't right. He's just got this gut feeling that there was foul play involved. So even though all of his colleagues are like, give it up, it's another suicide, Hank decides to follow up and find out what really happened. And so you've got a classic detective story set in this extraordinary time. And the combination is just really great. So that's The Last Policeman by Ben Winters. I'm definitely going to be reading book 2, which is Countdown City. My next audiobook in October was The Captives by Deborah Jo Immergut. This was a really interesting story. Psychological, it's listed as a psychological thriller. There's not a lot of action in it like you'd expect in a thriller, but it's definitely psychological suspense. So it begins with this man who is working as a therapist in a women's prison. And there's a hint that something went wrong in his career. That's how he ended up where he is. One day, one of the prisoners walks into his office for therapy, and he immediately recognizes her as the girl he had a huge crush on in high school. So she doesn't recognize him. She's got this little niggling feeling that he looks familiar. You know how that happens. But she doesn't know who he is. So it was the kind of deal where she was really popular in high school and he had no friends and was kind of invisible. So, but he was completely obsessed with her and followed her every move. And now here she is in his office. So they start these therapy sessions, which of course he should not be doing, clearly a conflict of interest, but he goes ahead anyway. And no surprise, he really gets even more connected to her. At one point, he decides he's going to find a way to get her out. So that's just sort of the setup. During the novel, there are all kinds of backflashes to how he grew up and what happened in his early life, what happened to his career. She's in prison for a very long time for murder, and that's all we know at the beginning. And so we get little by little, gradually, the backstory of her life, her childhood, what led up to the day that she got arrested. You don't actually find out the details of what happened until almost the end. So there is plenty of suspense here. What's he going to do? What did she do to get in prison in the first place? It was very well written, and I really enjoyed The Captives by Deborah Jo Immergut. My next print book read in October was High Country by Nevada Barr. I am a longtime fan of Nevada Barr, but it had been many years, maybe even almost 10 years, since I read one of her novels. So she writes this series of novels about a national park ranger named Anna Pigeon. So right off the bat, there's a lot that I love about this. As I said earlier, I love the outdoors. I love nature. Each of these books takes place in a different national park. I love the national parks, and my family has visited many of them. So it's especially fun to read a book set in one of the parks we've been to. And I love the fact that there's a female park ranger at the center of these books. So High Country by Nevada Barr, as you might be able to tell from the cover, takes place in Yosemite National Park. Anna has been called in. She's been working in Mississippi on the Natchez Trace Parkway, another place I've been to. She's been called into Yosemite because they need a ranger who can go undercover there, someone who no one knows. 4 young seasonal workers have gone missing in the park. They all went missing at the same time. They were clearly together. No one knows if they took off on purpose, if something happened to them, but they've been missing for a while. So Anna comes in undercover as a waitress in a beautiful old hotel in Yosemite. And she comes in to take over the job that one of the young women that's gone missing had. So Anna's almost 50. Doesn't really fit in with the seasonal work crowd here. But, and she goes to live in the dorms where this missing woman lived. She takes over her room. So her roommates are 20-somethings, but Anna begins poking around, trying to see what she can find out, talking to people, and she begins to get an inkling that there are some really bad things going on inside the park that the rangers don't know about. The ranger who asked her to come in and go undercover happens to have been called out of town for a week, and her deputy doesn't think anything of Anna or this whole undercover operation. He thinks it's a ridiculous idea. So Anna ends up on her own going up into the back country, high country. It's what Yosemite's in a valley, and when you go up into the hills, they call it the high country. And Anna goes up there alone. Now she has plenty of outdoor experience, hiking, backpacking. She's been a ranger for decades. But what she encounters up there is nothing she ever could have been prepared for. I remember now why I love these books so much. Nevada Barr is a wonderful writer. The suspense is amazing here. And there are 2 different climactic points where Anna's life is in danger, which just makes for very exciting, fast-paced reading. But besides the tension and the suspense, Nevada Barr has a wonderful sense of humor, and that comes through on the page. So there's suspenseful scenes. There's times when I was laughing out loud. I just really loved High Country by Nevada Barr. My last audiobook for October was Dennis Ever After by Tony Abbott. Now, this is a middle grade suspense novel, and I had recalled, I couldn't find this on my blog anywhere, so maybe it was a long time ago, but I think I've read a Tony Abbott book before and enjoyed it. Dennis Ever After is about the afterlife, but it's also about a murder. So Dennis, the narrator, is actually dead. And at the start of the novel, he is in this sort of interim place. They call it Port Haven. It's like a beautiful coastal town. And the dead go there to get ready to move on. In Port Haven, they're supposed to shed their living life and move on with the rest of their dead life, if that makes any sense. Dennis is kind of hanging around with his great-grandmother, Gigi, who he met in Port Haven. He was like a toddler when she died, so he didn't know her that well. And things are going okay until Dennis, it's been 5 years since his death, and he decides to check in on his twin brother. So his brother Matt is now 12 years old. Dennis died when when the boys were 7. And when Dennis peeks in on Matt and on his mom and dad, he sees that they are not moving on. Things are not better. In fact, they're getting even worse. Matt has become obsessed with finding out what happened to his brother. They know that Dennis was kidnapped. His body was found dead in the Gettysburg Park, which is close to here, on the stone monument for Georgia. And that's all they know. The culprit or culprits were never found. They don't know what actually happened. And it's just eating Matt up. So when Dennis goes to visit him, and he's just like looking in, he sees that Matt has somehow gotten the police report. He is just obsessed. He's got maps all over his room. He's got his best friend working on this. And so even though there are pretty severe consequences for Dennis to go back to the living world, to actually cross over and allow Matt to see him, he does that. He sees that it's necessary. And so the twin boys, one dead and one alive, begin working together to solve this mystery, the mystery of how Dennis died, what happened to him. In order to do this, they get his dad involved. Their dad has never really gotten over it either. So things aren't good between their mom and dad. They're fighting all the time because the dad still wants to know what happened too. So Matt manages to convince, only Matt can see Dennis. And Matt manages to convince his dad to take him, doesn't know that Dennis is along for the ride, to the amusement park where Dennis disappeared. And that begins their investigation. So this is a murder mystery, it's suspense, but it's got this afterlife ghost thing going on all the way through. I really loved this book. Now, it is a middle grade novel, so I do want to warn you, if you're thinking of it for your kids or you're a teacher, I would say older middle grade kids, because as the boys begin to investigate what happened to Dennis, I should have made clear, Dennis doesn't remember how he died. Things begin coming back to Dennis, and he's basically reliving what happened, getting kidnapped, dying. It's pretty tough stuff in some parts. Not graphic, but, emotionally difficult at times. So I loved it as an adult, and I think older middle graders and younger teens will really love this book. That's Dennis Ever After by Tony Abbott. Finally, my last book for the R.I.P. challenge, read in October, was A Furnace for Your Foe by Maddie Dalrymple. Now, this is book 4 in the Anne Kinnear suspense series, and you're probably getting sick of hearing me talk about this series. I don't normally read series. I love this one. Like I was saying with the Nevada Bar book, I read a few of those 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and then sort of forgot about it. I don't normally read a series from beginning to end, but that's what I've been doing with this. So I read book 1. Last October, I read book 2. This fall, I read books 3 and 4 because I love this series. So this also is a mystery involving ghosts. And in case you couldn't tell about my feelings for Dennis Ever After, I love that combination. Here, the main character, Anne Kinnear, is a woman who can sense spirits and communicate with them. So she very often ends up helping to solve a mystery by talking to the dead. In this novel, she is back on Mount Desert Island in Maine, which happens to be one of my favorite places in the world. That's the island that Acadia National Park is on. We're getting into the national park and outdoors thing again here. Anne is on Mount Desert Island. Book 2 also took place on Mount Desert Island. And Anne is back there because she's filming a documentary. The documentarian wanted both her and a colleague of hers who lives on Mount Desert Island. So they're there to film a documentary. A wealthy older man falls to his death off of a cliff on a hiking trail. And I can tell you from experience, there are plenty of steep cliffs on Mount Desert Island where you could fall to your death. But the strange thing here is that this was a hiking trail on his own property, close to his house, that he knew very well and had hiked dozens and dozens of times. And while everyone knows that trail is dangerous when it's wet, it wasn't wet that day, it was dry. He was out hiking with a younger woman that he works with. They were colleagues and hiking partners. And shortly after his death, she goes missing. So Anne and her colleague Garrett get involved with trying to help figure out what happened. So they're working on the documentary, but they're also trying to help the police and the families. So Anne talks to the man that died. She's looking for the woman that's missing. And this was just another outstanding novel from Maddie Dalrymple. I love this series. There's a lot of tension and suspense here. The mystery is very twisty with a lot of surprises toward the end. As always, I really enjoyed the Anne Kinnear series by Maddie Dalrymple. This one was A Furnace for Your Foe. And now I can read her latest book, number 5 in this series, that just came out this year. So looking forward to that. Okay, I can see that I probably still talk too long. I'm hoping to trim this down with editing, but please let me know in the comments below whether you prefer more information about the books or just a shorter video. I'd love to hear from you. And please tell me what you read in October. What were your favorite books? Were you participating in any challenges? Tell me about it in the comments below.